Loud and clear.
Great, thank you so much. All right, let's get started. Well, thank you everyone for being with us today. Really appreciate your time on a Sunday. I am August from FreedomTax Japan team, and I'll present the information today. We have some other team members with us as well today. We have Yamaguchi, who is a licensed accountant in Japan, and he made sure everything we share with you today is accurate and it's based on most up-to-date guidelines from the tax office. And during the presentation, especially during the Q&A, if there's anything I'm not sure about, I'll ask Yamaguchi at that time. We have Sunny also. He made sure our presentation is clear to the point. And lastly, we have Ayana. If you saw about this event on social media, like Facebook, Twitter, that was Ayana's work. She will also moderate the comment section today. So feel free to add your questions there while I present. So I will take about 15-20 minutes to go over the content today, and then we will go over the questions you submitted to us beforehand. And then finally, we'll have a more interactive time with your follow-up questions. So first, we'll go over taxes on foreign income, whether you need to report certain income. And then second is filing taxes more generally, and then your tax questions. So the whole session is going to take about 45 minutes, depending on how the last Q&A session goes. And quick disclaimer today, all the information we're giving you is based on the current guidelines, and rules may change, those guidelines may change over time. And it is also not personal tax advice because your situation may be different from our understanding. So please keep these in mind when you're with us today. All right, so the first section, taxes on foreign income. So today's topic is foreign income, foreign tax credit. We don't want to pay taxes twice on the same income if you're paying taxes in a different country. But before talking about foreign tax credit, I think we first need to talk about whether that particular income should be on your Japanese tax return. How do we determine that? And that depends on your resident status for tax purposes. I want to go over this because this is different from your immigration status. It's different from your visa. And obviously, it's different for everyone. So here's how we determine. There are three categories. Permanent resident is the most comprehensive one. And if you're a permanent resident for tax purposes, your worldwide income should be on your Japanese tax return. It's the most comprehensive category. But if you're a non-permanent resident, only domestic income and your money transfers into Japan need to be on your Japanese tax return. And the most limited category, if you're a non-resident, then only your domestic income should be on your Japanese tax return. So when we say domestic income, what is that exactly? What it mean by that is if you did the work while in Japan, while physically in Japan, that's considered domestic income. Where your customers are, where your employers are, or where the money is, those are not concerns. Only where you are located while doing that work matters for Japanese tax purposes. So if you did the work while being present in Japan, that's domestic income. But on the other hand, if you, let's say, visited your customer in India, you did the work there, you came back to Japan, that's not domestic income for Japanese tax purposes. And when it comes to other income like capital gains, investment income, if they're from outside of Japan, let's say you're a broker outside of Japan, that's also not domestic income. So now we know three categories. We know what domestic income is. How do we know our status for tax purposes? The starting point is whether you live the whole year in Japan. And when we say the whole year, we refer to the tax year. So now we're filing 2023 taxes. And if you live the whole 2023 in Japan, then you're either a permanent resident or non-permanent resident for tax purposes. And then whether you lived in Japan for less than 5 years in the last 10 years or more, and whether you're a Japanese citizen. So let's say I lived the whole 2023 in Japan, but I lived here less than 5 years and I'm not a Japanese citizen. That would put me in non-permanent resident category. So this is how we determine our resident status for tax purposes. And you don't need to memorize these rules because they may change every year. And of course, if you lived here, maybe last year it was 5 years, but now it's 6 years, your situation is going to be different. And this question should be the starting point of any Japanese tax filing when it comes to individual income taxes, because it determines what should be in there in the first place. So when you file taxes online with us, here's how we ask you this question. We have 4 boxes. Japanese citizen, live the entire year in Japan, or move to Japan during the year, or I just don't live in Japan anymore. So if I select I live the entire year in Japan, and I'm not selecting I'm a Japanese citizen, then the system guides you and says, well, based on your selection, you are a non-permanent resident. So you need to report just only your domestic income or any money transfers into Japan. But if I select 5 years or more, for example, it will tell me, well, you seem to be a permanent resident. So make sure to report all your income, your worldwide income, whether you sold a house or whatever income you may have. So now we know what to do when it comes to our sort of foreign income, whether that needs to be on the tax return, what to do about it. After we make that determination, let's just assume the income needs to be on your tax return. So how do we go about claiming foreign tax credit so that you don't need to pay taxes on the same income twice? So there are a couple of requirements to claim foreign tax credit on your Japanese taxes. The first one is you have already paid the foreign tax. If you haven't paid it already in the other country, you cannot claim foreign tax credit on the Japanese side. And this year, especially, the tax office has gotten more strict. So most likely they will require documents to show that the foreign tax was charged and it was paid as a supporting document attached to your tax filing. The second requirement is tax years should match. So tax years on your overseas taxes and on the Japanese tax return. So let's just say after this session, you just realized, oh, in 2022, I had some income and some foreign taxes I need to report. Let me report that on this year's taxes, 2023. That wouldn't work. You would need to amend that year's taxes. So that would be 2022 in that example. So make sure the taxes you paid and the tax return you report, the years are consistent. They are the same. And the final requirement is the statement of foreign tax credit. This is a worksheet, a calculation sheet attached to your tax filing. It is not as straightforward oftentimes as, let's just say, my Japanese tax balance is 100,000 yen, and I already paid 100,000 yen in the other country, so I will get to do 100,000 minus 100,000, 0. Even though the tax treaties ensure you don't have to pay taxes twice, that has to go through some calculations, the taxes you paid and the income you're reporting. And that worksheet is what that's for. Most likely at the end of that worksheet, you will see that you will need to pay taxes twice, but there are some ratios, there are some tax rates it needs to go through. So that statement is necessary to attach to your tax filing. So those are the 3 main requirements to claim foreign tax credit on your foreign income if you already pay taxes in another country. Now, more specifically, I can speak for ourselves. When you file with us, all you would need to do is when you click I paid foreign taxes under deductions, and I'll show this page live in a minute, we will ask you 3 questions. We will ask you, well, how much was that income? How much taxes you paid on it? And which country it belongs to. These will be the supporting points of that foreign tax credit worksheet, and the remaining information we'll take from the rest of your tax filing. So these will be the information we need. And Sometimes we may reach out to you for supporting documents, or maybe we need some clarifications, but more or less, this is what you need to claim foreign tax credit on your Japanese taxes when you file with us. So now we went over how to determine whether particular income should be on the Japanese tax return. And if it does need to be on the tax return, how do we go about claiming foreign tax credit? Now in this section, this is the section before our Q&A. I want to talk about filing taxes more general, the steps to follow, because there are people in our audience who are filing taxes in Japan for the first time, or maybe they changed jobs, they're not sure, or just as a refresher. So there are 3 steps. These are these 3 steps are not only when filing with us, but wherever you file, they're more or less the same. So step 1, you start with your income, your salary, your freelance income, your investment income, whatever it may be. After you determine that, oh, that needs to be on the Japanese tax return, that's step 1, putting your income. Step 2 is deductions. So this can be your dependents. Let's say you have a spouse or you're supporting family members, your taxes you already paid. Or if you're a freelancer, your freelance expenses, your business related expenses, or foreign tax credit. So all of those can be considered deductions after reporting your income, and they will help reduce your tax balance. And when you file taxes online with us, step 3 is we do the work. For example, let's say you have dependents. You don't need to know how much deduction exactly you can get if you have a spouse, and let's say your spouse is making a certain amount of income, or you're supporting not one family member, but 2, 3 family members. We do those calculations for you. And same for foreign tax credit. Once we know the income, how much taxes you paid in the country, we prepare the worksheet. But we do ask you some questions. And I want to show you what those questions look like. Can everybody see this page? Is it sharing on my screen? Okay, great. So when you click Get Started or File Your Taxes, these will take you to the same page. And I just want to take a minute to show you where you can put those answers. The first question we ask you is which taxes you want to file. We are authorized preparers on the US side as well. So if you need to file US taxes, we can do Japanese taxes and US taxes at the same time. And we carry foreign taxes over for you. So you don't need to pay anything twice. But for this session's purposes, let's just say I want to file taxes for Japan only. And just like I showed you earlier, what is your tax residence status? So this is something I need to answer before I start my tax filing, because it will determine everything that comes after. Let's just say I lived the entire year in Japan and I've been here less than 5 years. So I'm a non-permanent resident. And then these are our prices. You're not paying us anything yet. This is just for transparency. And these are our tax preparation and filing prices. We have flat prices. It doesn't change based on your income, or if you have a side job, or you sold your house, you have investment income, doesn't change. We just show you these for transparency at this stage, but you're not paying us anything yet. And now finally, because I will be entering some personal information about myself, we want to make sure that information stays private and you keep your progress. So I'm just going to go ahead and let's just say I'll enter my email and I'll create an account right away. So here's this 1-page form I need to fill out. Just some basic personal information like my name, my address, date of birth. These are the required information to file taxes. And then some income and deductions, just like I showed you in step 1 and 2. So for income, let's just say I have a job. So I receive Gensen. In that case, I would need to upload my Gensen or my salary slip. And the reason we ask for that is, in this case, that payment slip already has your gross salary, already has the taxes you paid, your other deductions that may be shown on your payment slip, your employer's information. We don't want you to enter all of them one by one because it's already on the document. So we just make it easier and say, well, you can just upload the document and we'll carry everything over. So this is how the income side of things would work. Sometimes we ask for documents to make things easier. Sometimes you can just enter numbers if that's easier. And for deductions, again, we have a bunch, and let's just say I paid foreign taxes. I have a dependent spouse. So if I have a dependent spouse, all I would need is just enter the full name, spouse date of birth, and spouse income. And then we'll calculate how much deduction you can get based on that information. Or if you have other dependents, you can enter them here. So once you fill this out, we prepare your tax draft. And of course, if there's anything confusing, if there's anything that doesn't look right to us, or we need clarification, we reach out to you. But if everything is clear, we prepare your draft, we share it with you, we go over any questions you may have. And then once you approve the draft, we file with the tax office. So we only file with the tax office after you approve it. And we can see your tax balance, tax refund before filing. So you can take your time and we can explain your taxes in that process. So going back to steps, these are the steps you more or less need to follow when you file taxes really anywhere. Now, lastly, we have a lot of freelancers in our audience, actually. We saw the questions you submitted beforehand, and many of them were about freelancing. So before I move on to Q&A, I just want to go over how to report or what information is needed to file taxes as a freelancer. In that case, just like the previous steps I showed you, step one would be your income. So you can just enter the number there. But if your payers, your customers already pay taxes on behalf of you, you can upload those documents as well, or you can just report the numbers to us, whichever is easier. You know, when you, for example, charge your customer 100,000 yen, but you actually get less than that because they pay taxes for you, that's what should go onto your Japanese tax return so that you don't pay those taxes again. And after income, we have business related expenses. Ayana just put the link. There are a bunch of categories for business related expenses, and those are from the tax office. You can enter total number for any category that applies to you, and that will be the total number in that tax year. So we wouldn't need item by item. For example, well, this week I spent 5,000 on train, 5,000 yen. And last week I spent this much on food. You wouldn't need to do that, just total numbers for any category that applies to you. And any fees you pay us are also completely tax deductible as well as a business related expense. But timing matters there. So if you file taxes with us for 2023, you would be paying us this year, 2024. So that would be 2024's business related expense, which will be filed next year. So please keep that in mind. And feel free to take a look at that guide. It has a bunch of categories and see which one applies to you. And on the page, on that tax interview page, let's just say I'm a freelancer. So what I would do is I would say, well, I have self-employment income. Just like I showed you earlier, I would put my total sales and my business related expenses. Again, we don't need receipts, invoices, or proofs most of the time, but whatever you input, make sure you have documentation, you have records, in case the tax office inquires. So this is how you would file taxes as a freelancer specifically. Okay, I think this is all for the content today. Now I will go over tax questions. Just want to take a look at the comment section to see if there are any questions, any clarifications I can make. It seems clear. Frank says, are your fees also tax deductible if I'm a regular company employee? It is not, and the reason is because as a regular employee, you're not allowed to deduct business-related expenses. That's the reason why. But freelancers are able to deduct those expenses, and our fee is one of them. But as a company employee, unfortunately, as a general rule, business-related expenses can't be deducted. Therefore, our fees can't be deducted as well. Um, Kenai says, I'm a 1099 employee from teaching online in the US, which means on the US side, operating as an independent contractor, freelancer, but I'm a full-time Japanese employee and non-resident. What is the best way to go about filing? So can I, if we go back to the residence determination, permanent resident, non-permanent resident. So because it sounds like you did the work while in Japan, you're saying online, that would be domestic income, and it should be on the Japanese tax return. And what you can do on the US side is claim foreign tax credit on the US side. So you would report your salary, your independent contracting income on your Japanese tax return. And on the US side, you would report those as well, but claim foreign tax credit so you don't need to pay anything twice. There are a couple of questions. Let me go over FAQs real quick. We have about 4 or 5 questions, so it will take under 10 minutes. And then we can have a Q&A, more engaging Q&A after that, because I see Melissa also has a question about that, about freelance income. So the first question is, as a single member LLC based in the US, so that's a company in the US, but it's a single member, and clients are also in the US. Is there anything in particular I need to know for Japanese taxes? So other than everything we talked about, LLCs are considered separate entities for Japanese taxes. So as a separate company. This means you don't need to report all the income that LLC generates on your personal individual income tax return on the Japanese side, but only distributions from the LLC. So the money you take out from the LLC should be reported. And if Ayana can put the link for that, there's a case the tax office and the courts really considered, because on the US side, LLCs work a little bit differently. It can be on your personal tax return, but Japan, as a default rule, considers that as a separate company, as a separate entity. So only distributions need to be on your personal tax return. How can I report the sale of apartment abroad as a permanent tax resident? So we would start with the income, so the sales amount. And expenses, there are sale related expenses such as you know, agent related fees, or there are a lot of fees when selling a house. So most of them can be deducted. The most important, not the most important, all of them are important, but a big item is depreciation. And that should be based on Japanese depreciation rules when we're talking about how to report that income on Japanese taxes. And to find that out, there are additional information we would need, such as the type of the apartment, depending on how the materials used in the construction, for example, the useful life changes, and that changes the depreciation factor. So we calculate them for you after we ask a few questions, and then foreign tax credit if you already paid taxes on that sale abroad. Just to show how that looks like, by the way. If I sold my apartment, I would just say I sold stocks or property on this tax interview. And going to that page, I would select property. So these are the questions we ask. Most of them, actually, all of them are not really technical. It's just sale amount, sale date, when did you sell it, what's the address of the property, and a few questions about the property type. We can, if there's anything confusing, we can go over this together and fill it out together. But after you fill out this information, we prepare everything about depreciation, foreign tax credit, all of that. So this is how you would report sale of apartment as a permanent resident on your Japanese tax return. These are the information you would need most of the time. What if there's income based on investment in another country in the EU, and I want to report said money either monthly as a whole? Is that taxed? Anything to consider? Any tips? So we have an investment abroad outside of Japan. Should I bring it as a whole? Should I bring it little by little? What should I know about my taxes? So treatment depends on your resident status. If you're a non-permanent resident, then only the amount you send to Japan should be on the tax return. But if you're a permanent resident, it doesn't matter how much of that investment income you transferred into Japan. All the gains should be reported on the Japanese tax return. And when it comes to monthly or as a whole, taxes are filed annually, so it won't make a difference. And the next question is freelance income not paid out in Japan, left in another country. How would that be taxed? The location of the money, just like location of your customers, location of your employer, they don't matter for Japanese tax purposes. Where you did the work matters. So if you did that work in Japan, even though the money may be in Norway, that's domestic income for Japanese tax purposes, and it should be on the Japanese tax return. We added this question as well. What is the tax implications for the first 1 year, and how to plan the tax for the upcoming year? So we added this because in the audience, there are a few audience members who are filing taxes for the first time. And in Japan, there are quite a few changes from first year to second year. So I want to go over this. In first year, there is no residence tax, no self-employment tax, and typically no social insurance premiums that you pay monthly. This is because most of those are based on last year's income. And because it's your first year, there's no last year's income on record. So that's why first year, there are no such taxes. But after you file, so let's say you file this in this season for 2023, you will probably get a residence tax bill if you're a self-employed, making approximately over 3 million yen as net business income. You will probably get self-employment tax and probably social insurance premiums. So your taxes will be higher in that second year. And you get those bills. So if you file this season, you'll get them sometime around June, July from the ward office. They calculate those for you based on the national tax filing we do, based on your income, based on your deductions there. And they say this is how much you need to pay, and they will include the payment slips month by month. So this is how first year and second year changes. Deductible expenses. Do we need to provide documents for home office expense? So home office expense is one of the categories for business related expenses for freelancers. For those expenses, home office and other expenses as well, you don't need to provide documents. Just the numbers are okay, but make sure to have them in your records in case the tax office inquires. For dependents, what documents do you have to submit if you're supporting family back home and want on your tax returns? This is one of the areas where the tax office got more strict. So if you're supporting family back home abroad, outside of Japan, we do need documents that prove your relationship with the dependent, bank statements that show support to the dependent. That will be attached. Those two will be attached to your tax return, and bank statements should obviously show the amount that you sent, even though they don't affect the amount of deduction you can get. There is a minimum threshold. I believe it's 380,000 yen. If Sunny or Yamaguchi can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. If you supported them after 380,000 yen, then you can get dependent deduction. And do I get money back if I have dependents? Yes, you can. if your deductions result such that your tax balance is less than your deduction amount, or yeah, your taxable income, and then the tax amount we find ends up being minus after we include your dependents, you can get a tax refund. And you can claim dependents as long as they are your relative, their net income is under 480,000 yen. If they are earning more than that, for Japanese tax purposes, they're not your dependents. And they're being financially supported by you. So if your dependent fits into these criteria, you can get tax refund by including them on your tax return as dependents. Okay, so those are the answers to the questions you submitted to us beforehand. And of course, we weren't able to include every single question. We had to group some questions, make sure there's a theme, but feel free to add them right now to the comment section if you still want to know about your question and I haven't answered them in the past 10 minutes. So I'm going back to the comment section. Thank Guyana for telling me who's next in turn. So Melissa's question: I have freelance income with a company that doesn't withhold my taxes. I'm considered self-employed with them. After I file my final tax return, will the tax office send me a bill, or do I have to send payment myself? So when you file national taxes, which is the filing we do, and it's the first filing you should do when you have income, we will be able to see your tax amount, and you don't need to wait for a bill from the tax office to pay that. As long as you pay by March 15, you can pay it anytime, but you don't need to wait for a bill for that. The bills are for local taxes, residence tax, or other taxes you may have, such as self-employment tax. And you will get those bills sometime around June or July from the ward office. But for national taxes, anytime until March 15 is okay, and you don't need to wait for a bill from them. But you do need to do the tax filing on your own. Because they will not, if you don't do a tax filing, they will not know about it. So there's going to be no bills, nothing, and that means the income is not reported. By the way, guys, when I answer the questions, feel free to add more follow-up questions you have about that original question if there's anything I'm missing. And also, if you want to speak, feel free to raise your hand or just unmute your microphone and we can have a chat like that. But let me go over these other questions in the comment section now. So Gareth's question. Okay, foreign tax credit. I pay tax on my UK rental income for the first time, but the UK tax year is different to the Japanese tax year. UK is April 1st to March 31st. What should we do in this case? Yeah, this is a very common case, not only for UK, but I know Australia also has a different tax year. What we need to do in that case is, for Japanese taxes, it's January 1st to December 31st. So we need to find your income, rental income, in that period. That means you don't need to include, let's say, February 2024, even though that may be included in another tax year for UK tax purposes. So just the income from January 1st to December 31st for Japanese tax purposes. And for the taxes you paid, you would need to prorate it. So for example, if the taxes you paid is, let's just say for 100,000 yen and you paid 20% tax on it, then we would find income in 12 months, let's just say 80,000 yen, and apply 20% tax rate to that amount. So that's how to deal with different tax years between Japan and other countries. Does it matter if I file my US taxes first or my Japan taxes first? Shirley asks. It matters if you're claiming foreign tax credit. Foreign tax credit rule is you have already paid the tax in that other country. So if you're claiming foreign tax credit on the Japanese side, for example, it means you've already filed US taxes, you've already paid those taxes, and now you're claiming tax credit on the Japanese side. Or vice versa, you're filing in Japan first and then carrying those taxes over to the US side. Renee asks, if you're a 100% remote worker in Japan, regular employee only, would you claim any of the electricity hardware expenses? From your previous answer, I guess not, but 100% remote. Yeah, on the tax return, there's no classification for salaried employees and separating them to remote or not remote. It's just salary income. So for salary income, unfortunately, those related expenses cannot be deducted. Instead, there's a standard salary deduction, and it's the same for everyone, same rate for everyone, depending on the income level. But unfortunately, those related expenses can't be deducted if you're classified as a regular employee. Kat asks, with PR, how does national and local Japanese taxes work? If I spend more than 1 year outside of Japan, do I report pay into national and not local tax? Um, Yamaguchi, if you can correct me if there's anything I'm missing in my answer. Um, so you have PR, national tax. When you say when I spend more than 1 year outside of Japan, the intention matters really more than the duration since you're a permanent resident. So if you keep your residence, if you keep your home, if you keep everything in Japan and you spend 1 year outside of Japan and you come back, that means you spend that time outside with the intention of coming back. You're not really leaving Japan. So that doesn't make a difference from Japanese tax perspective. And in terms of local taxes trigger when you have residence here as of January 1st, I believe, the first day of the year. Um, when you have residence tax kicks in. But again, if you're leaving the country with the intention of coming back, you keep your residence, you keep your everything, then there's no change for your taxes. Dean asks, I'm an American living in Japan more than 5 years. I turned 70 and started to receive US Social Security in 2023. Is this taxable income in Japan? So, Dean, because you're considered permanent resident, since you said more than 5 years, um, Social Security income, just like any other worldwide income, should be on the Japanese tax return. But because you're most likely paying taxes on the US side on that income, what you can do is claim foreign tax credit on the Japanese side. By the way, there's one exemption to this. We've been seeing it from time to time recently. If you worked for the government, let's say you worked for the US government directly, and you have some pension income as a result of that work, or you get salary as a result of that work, that income doesn't need to be on your Japanese tax return. It's a little exemption written on the treaty, on the tax treaty. But other than that, the income should be on the Japanese tax return. Frank says, I support my children financially with monthly bank transfers uh, from my funds abroad. I don't wire the money from Japan. Is that also qualifying as support of dependents? Um, if Yamaguchi can correct me if I'm wrong, the where the money goes from um, is not a concern as long as it is from your account that shows you paid it. Um, and as long as it's on record, I think you should be able to get you should be able to use that as supporting document that you paid for your children's expenses, so you can get a dependent deduction. We have a few more questions. By the way, how is everything so far? If there's anything maybe not working or my answers are too slow, too fast. Is everything okay right now? Just want to get a quick feedback because I realize I've been talking for quite some time and just want to hear from you guys. Everything going fine so far?
All good.
Great, thank you so much. Nabil says, thanks for the session. Thank you very much. I have two questions. In the case I overpaid my health insurance in 2023 and I'm getting a refund in 2024, how should I report that? What documentation should I keep for that? I'm guessing how you're asking how you should report that on the Japanese tax return. How much you paid as cash balance should be on the Japanese tax return. But if you paid, let's say 100,000 yen in 2023, and in 2024 you got a tax refund. Um, I don't believe there's anything to amend on your 2023 tax return. But I will refer to Yamaguchi if if there's anything wrong with my answer. Um, Yamaguchi, maybe you also need to take a few minutes to research that because it's a special situation there. So just to reiterate, um, overpaid my health insurance in 2023 and I'm getting a refund in 2024. How should I report that? We'll get back to this question. Question two. I moved to a new apartment and I'm working full-time from there as a freelancer. Can I file the initial fees as business expenses, such as the deposit, the real estate company introduction fees, or renting a car, etc.? If they're related to your business, you can, but because the apartment as a whole is also your living quarters, not everything related to it can be a business related expense. So the conservative way would be to not deduct everything. Deposit cannot be deducted as a business related expense. Real estate company introduction fees, renting a car. Again, because these are related to, it's not office space specifically, it's also for your living quarters. Uh, you may have a hard time explaining that this is business related expense. So it wouldn't be a conservative method to uh, include them. Chris says, is it possible to get a recording of this? Yes. So it is being recorded and we will share a recording with you a few days after this meeting, as well as the presentation. So in your own time, feel free to take a look and go over the materials. Mark says, a friend of his hasn't paid tax in Japan on US investments for many years. If he's to correct this, how many years must he go back and correct? Based on the guidelines we have, 5 years. Um, Typically, the tax office doesn't go back more than 5 years. So if you're in that situation, 5 years should be enough. Joe has a question about US 401k. Um, Joe, so the question is not, it is related to taxes, but social security and pension are sort of a different area from taxes. So we don't really specialize in how to calculate those. Joe, if you don't mind, we'll take a note of your question. If Ayana can take a note of this question, please. Um, we will research and see in terms of taxes. Again, the social security is in our area, so we wouldn't be able to tell you any numbers on that side. But in terms of taxes, um, let us get back to you on that. Amy says, I appreciate this chance. Well, thank you so much for being with us, guys. Really appreciate it. Um, So Shirley says, and I think this is the final question in the comment section. So after this question, you guys feel free to speak up if you want to ask any follow-up questions. Otherwise, we will end the session. Can separate medical expenses for a husband and wife be combined as a tax deduction on one person's Japan tax return? Um, I will, so from what I remember from the guidelines, and if Yamaguchi can correct me if I'm wrong, you can deduct family members' medical expenses on a single tax return, as long as they also don't report those expenses on their tax return. So it should be reported on a single tax return, and it is okay to include family members' expenses um, on a single tax return. Okay, I don't see any more follow-up questions. I just want to check one last time. Do you guys have any notes for us? Any questions? Anything before we end this session?
Oh, Goose,
Yes, sir.
I have a question. As a non-permanent resident
Mhm.
receiving Social Security benefits from the USA deposited directly to my Japanese bank, is that reportable income in Japan?
You said non-permanent resident?
Correct. I've been here less than 5 years.
Okay, but it is transferred to Japan.
Directly, yes.
Okay, if it's transferred to Japan, it should be on the Japanese tax return, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mark says, I have an LLC in the US and it has an associated bank account. If overseas assets are over a certain amount, I understand I'm required to report all overseas assets. How about this bank account as it is under an LLC? PR here. So if LLC is under your ownership, Mark, that is considered your asset, and LLC's value should be on the foreign assets declaration. And if LLC has certain amount of cash, that should be part of LLC's value as well. And the threshold the market is referring to is 50 million yen. So if you're a permanent resident for tax purposes and outside of Japan, the worth of your total assets, overseas assets, is more than 50 million Japanese yen. You need to do a foreign assets declaration to report those assets. There are no taxes on them. It's only for transparency purposes. And the tax office wants to know if, for example, you leave Japan sometime in the future, so there may be some exit taxes or there's an inheritance tax situation. But during filing or after it, there are no taxes on it as long as you don't have those exit tax or inheritance tax situations. Renee asks, how would gift or inheritance be taxed when coming from overseas, getting 1 million yen from family members? That would be so everything we talked about today is income taxes, individual income taxes. Gift and inheritance tax filing, those are separate from income taxes. It doesn't depend on your other deductions. It doesn't depend on your other income. You would just need to report that as if it's a gift, it would be a gift tax filing, or if it's inheritance, it would be inheritance tax filing. And it's a separate filing from income taxes. Now it says, what documentation should I keep for apartment rents? Documents that show the rent amount and the rent was paid, because when you deduct that as business related expense, you report the amount. Let's just say in 1 year I paid 500,000 yen. So documents to show that 500,000 yen was paid should be in your records. Um, Other than that, the exact deduction amount applied to your business related expenses depends on the percentage of space you use as your home office. Typically, it's between 10 to 40%. You don't need to submit proof of that during your tax filing. So if you paid 500,000 yen and you used half of your apartment as home office, then 250,000 yen can be deducted as a business related home office expense. Yamaguchi, do you have any comments about this question from Nabil? Overpaid my health insurance in 2023 and I'm getting a refund in 2024. How should I report that?
I've already answered in text.
Oh, you did? Oh, I didn't see it. Okay.
Yeah, it's in a comment to Nimble's original question.
Oh, perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much. Oh, yes, I see the reply. Great. Okay, I don't see any more questions, and it's been around 50 minutes, so I don't want to keep you guys wait any longer. But if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us at info@freedomtax.jp. You can also reach out to me directly at august@freedomtax.jp. We'll be happy to help. And if you are considering filing taxes with us and have some questions, what I would recommend is fill out that online form. So if you go to freedomtax.jp and click get started or file your taxes, you'll be taken to that form. So when you fill it out, we can have a conversation. We can answer your questions in the context of your numbers. So it'll be a more specific conversation, and I think it'll be more helpful. Before we end, I just want to answer these two questions, by the way. Mark says, can you share information about your company tax filing system consulting if this is provided? Right. So as I mentioned, that online form on freedomtax.jp, when you fill that out, we review it, we prepare your drafts. But if there's anything that doesn't look right or we need clarifications, Mark, we reach out to you. You can get consultation anytime during this process. So you can get it when we prepare your draft, or you can get it during filling out that form if there's anything confusing with the form. And if you're interested in more information about our company, that's on our website as well. Final question from Renee. Is there a threshold for reporting? If you have only €100 income from a mini job, I heard there's a minimum amount from when you have to start reporting. That minimum amount applies when this is your only income. But if you already have salary, some side income, even though that other income may be €100, it should be on the tax return. All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, for being with us today. Really appreciate your time. And we will send the recording and this presentation to you in the next few days. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm going to end this session right now. Take care.